Good morning, everyone. My name is Jessica Koth, and I'm the Director of Public Relations for the National Funeral Directors Association. Welcome to today's live webinar, during which we're going to discuss the COVID-19 pandemic and practical advice and guidance that as funeral directors can implement in your funeral homes as you're serving families. Today, we are joined by NFDA President Bryant Hightower and funeral director and embalming expert Wally Hooker. I'd like to turn the floor over to these gentlemen, and we'll start with Bryant.
Morning. The purpose of today's webinar is to disseminate some additional information that recently become available from the CDC. This has certainly been a fluid situation that continues to unravel. There'll be more information coming, and NFDA will get it out to you as soon as they can. Please understand, I know a lot of you have forwarded questions to NFDA that have not yet been answered. It's simply because we want to give you the best, most honest answer possible. And until we have the right information, we just don't know what to tell you. Please also understand, NFDA has been working with the federal government on mass fatality planning for 14 or 15 years. We're the only funeral service association that's been involved in mass fatality training and implementation of a plan. So we're in the mix. We're getting the latest information and also seen as an expert by the federal government on funeral service and related matters. So as information becomes available, we'll be the first to get it, and we'll be the first to share it with our members and others in funeral service. Please understand, as we get information, we'll get it out to you as soon as we can. But I want to turn it over to Wally to talk about some of the practical application of some of the CDC guidelines.
Well, good morning. I don't consider myself an expert by any sense of the word, but I'm glad to help what little I can to try to mitigate some of the problems that we're facing today. And I think the first thing we need to keep in mind is, as funeral service practitioners, we need to be the calm, reassuring voice in our communities. It's has a lot of unknowns out there. People are scared. People are unaware of what's going on. They don't know what the right answers are. So as we are about our daily duties, as we're on social media, we need to reassure our communities that we are trained, we're educated, we're aware of what's going on, and we're here to still care for their loved ones and them as well. And you know, that starts with us. We'll find our way through this, and it starts with business as usual. We just have to attempt to do what we do in a little different manner at this point. So as we look at handling these bodies, I think the first thing we need to think about is protecting ourselves, protecting those around the deceased, as well as handling the deceased in an appropriate manner. I know we've talked about wearing masks and personal protection equipment, and that's come down through the CDC. We should be using those items routinely. But as we handle these bodies, I think it's important that we protect the bodies from those around us. And by that, I mean, perhaps as we move the bodies, if there's not family around, actually put a mask over their face and nostrils. If you don't have that ability, carry a disc spray with you and some web roll cotton, because we've talked a lot about over the years of bloodborne pathogens and to protect ourselves from them. Now we're talking about something that's airborne. So I think, me personally, I'm not speaking on behalf of NFDA, I'm saying what I have suggested to others. Perhaps introduce disc spray into the nostrils and the oral cavity, and then either insert web roll cotton or just place cotton over it and spray it again to keep any particulate from coming out in the air, just as a beginning. And then also disinfect those bodies with a disinfectant spray before we actually handle them. And I've seen tough people on social media talking about they don't wear gloves. Don't do that. Wear gloves. I don't know if they're just joking. Wear gloves. Protect yourselves. As we get these bodies into our funeral homes, I've seen people that are promoting direct cremations, they are advocates of immediate burials with these infected cases. We're doing a disservice to our communities and the families we serve if we buy into the pandemonium out there. As I said, we have got to be the reassuring voice of reason. We know what to do, we know how to do it, and we need to let the families know that we can still have the open casket visitation and funerals as we have had in the past. It's just a little bit different application now as we approach these bodies, and it starts with a good, thorough disinfection and using disinfecting soap before we start the embalming process. And these are my opinions. These are not opinions of NFDA. I'm sharing with you the best that I have. And I have some friends that are in the chemical business, and I've visited with them, and I've got information from their websites. And these aren't just my opinions. These are suggestions and recommendations from major chemical companies here in the country. So as we go about the embalming process, I would suggest as well using a higher index percent solution, maybe up to 5%, to try to overcome this virus. You know, we're not 100% sure how long it will survive in a dead body. There is no way that we can guarantee that we remove 100% of the blood or the fecal matter or the aspirant when we go about our jobs. So we just have to be prudent and just step it up a little bit, if you will. Maybe add an extra bottle of cavity fluid as well, and do a re-aspiration and introduce a couple more bottles of fluid up and down. And just a good thorough, as we were taught in mortuary college, we had the initial disinfection, the concurrent, and the terminal disinfection. And I think it's more important today as ever. And once we have these bodies prepared appropriately, embalmed appropriately, disinfected, rewashed, and disinfected again, we can dress them, have them in an open casket, and place them in our chapels, and they will not pose a health hazard to anyone that comes into our facilities. That's my opinion. That's what I've picked up from the CDC. That's what I've picked up from the chemical companies I've been in communication with. So our families deserve our leadership. The families we serve look to us for that leadership and for guidance, and that's the road we need to follow. And you know, I could go on about more in detail about how to prepare these bodies, but I think some of you will have questions. And again, I'm telling you, this is my opinions and my approach of how I handle things as we go into it. And I have a visitation later today, and I've talked with the staff, and the way we're going to approach it, the weather's mild here, our front door will be open. The man that works the door will be there, but we will have the door propped open so you don't have to handle the door. We have adequate amounts of hand sanitizer. We'll have fresh supply of pins, and we'll remove them often. And we have placards made to please give families the respect that you came here to offer them, but please respect the distance and touching and hugging, you know, for your safety as well as the health of the family. That's the approach we're taking here. But other than that, it's business as usual.
You know, to Wally's point, the families we serve, irregardless of the cause of death, deserve our very best. They deserve a chance to say their goodbye. They deserve that open casket viewing if that's what they choose. So if we're the professionals that we should be, and we use those universal precautions and we follow the CDC guidelines, at this point, there's nothing to indicate that we can't offer those families everything that any other family would be allowed to have.
Yeah, I just want to, I don't mean to interrupt you, gentlemen, but I just want to remind those who are tuning in either via our Zoom webcast or on Facebook, if you have questions, please use the Q&A feature in Zoom to send questions to our two experts. They're both funeral directors, both certainly can answer questions as best we can right now. As Bryant mentioned at the beginning, there's certainly some things that we just don't know yet and that we're working to get information, but the information that we have, we're able to answer questions as best we can. If you're watching on Facebook and have questions, share a question in the comment. I'm monitoring those questions on my phone, and I'll pass them along to our experts as we go along. So please feel free to continue.
Jessica, I think it's important to let those watching us this morning realize that we will be hosting a CDC webinar on Monday that will give additional information and answer any more specific questions. So stay tuned for more information about that. That's something that's happened relatively quickly and came about because of our relationship with HHS, CDC, and so forth. So stay tuned for that. It's coming up on Monday.
Okay. Wally, did you have anything else you wanted to cover? If not, it looks like we have
Sure.
some questions coming in on Zoom, and just pardon me here, I'm going to get close to the camera. First question from George. Our state governor has announced that he is limiting gatherings to 100 persons. All other gatherings need to be canceled right now. How should we address this with the families that we serve?
That's almost a legal question.
Yeah, I think, certainly local and state public health officials are certainly, in some cases, issuing guidance and rules in this time that is, even more strict than what the CDC is recommending. And so, of course, you have to defer to what those local experts, health experts, are recommending. So,
Jeff, what's interesting about that, I'm sorry you weren't finished. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
We received a directive from a local health department that they recommended no travel out of the state of Indiana. They recommended no gatherings more than 10 people. But yet our governor indicated 250 people. So at some point, there's not a meeting of the minds. And at least in our little funeral home here in rural Indiana, it's business as usual. People need the opportunity to say goodbye. We had a death last night, and that was the first question the daughter and the son had this morning. Can mom be embalmed? Can we have an open casket? And can people come to say goodbye to her? And my answer, personally, not on behalf of NFDA, is absolutely.
Yeah, and I think
your father.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously have to defer to local guidelines, but there are other options. If you have webcasting software, that is certainly an option. If you're able to do a service with a smaller gathering of people, only immediate family, and webcast that, that is certainly an option. If you don't have webcasting software, doing something like Facebook Live might work for that family. You might talk with the family about, perhaps having a small gathering for immediate family now. And then once this crisis is over and some of those restrictions have been lifted, perhaps you have another memorial gathering at a later date. So I think you have to think about, as funeral directors, think about what it is that you can do for families if you have those kinds of restrictions in your state. And discuss those options and figure out what the family is going to be most comfortable with as you talk through those options with them.
Jessica, you're right. It's going to be state driven. I mean, I know some states have excluded religious ceremonies as well as funerals from some of those exemptions or some of those limitations. Other states have set a number and have not included funeral homes in any exemption. So it's going to be important for folks to stay up to date on exactly what their state guidelines are, and that's different across state lines, obviously.
Okay.
Can I answer a couple of questions that have popped up?
Yep, absolutely.
This is to, let's see, Peggy. She's asking, Peggy Burkett, why advising not to aspirate? I would love to know the answer to this. Thanks, Sherry. I'm not advising anyone not to aspirate. That's a big no. I mean, we need to get that out of there because there's a lot of I call it bad juju when I lecture, and some people don't like that. Do a thorough aspiration. Absolutely. Do not back away from 1 minute from aspiration. If you don't have a long discharge hose, I would recommend getting one that goes to the bottom of the basin or into the water, so you're not discharging that where the particulate may get into the air, because that's asking for trouble. or just even put a towel around it so it doesn't splatter. But yes, absolutely aspirate, and use plenty of cavity fluid. And Will Griffin asked, should any precautions be taken when entering nursing homes or hospitals for removal? And what we found here in Indiana, hospitals and nursing homes have their own protocol. They're going to ask you if you've traveled out of the state or out of the country. They're going to ask you if you've had any kind of symptoms of the flu in the last 2 weeks. So the protocol for entering a nursing home or a hospital is going to be specific based on what their recommend, or what they have put together with their medical director. And in Ohio, they've made a decision based on their own criteria for everyone's safety. I don't need the government to tell me to distance or limit contact. Thank you for letting me have my input. I understand that, Gary. And we've been asked to both panelists, speaking to normal cases, do you have any specific convet advice? Yeah, that's what I was talking about. I was not talking about a normal embalming. Anything that I spoke to today was about coronavirus case. Maybe they missed that, but that's what I was discussing. And Mark McDonald wants to know, should we carry disc spray to nursing homes and hospice facilities and spray individuals before the transfer? Absolutely. I think it's a great idea, because those all are compliant with what the CDC expects them to be. They're 60% or more alcohol. Absolutely, you should use those for your own safety and the safety of those around.
Yep.
Another
getting a lot of questions about supplies and PPE coming in, and I just want to reiterate to those who may have missed the comment earlier, we have been working very, very closely with the CDC. We've had those relationships for decades, and we are in conversation with them. And actually on Monday, we are going to be hosting another live webinar. We'll have details on that very soon, but where the CDC will directly address that issue with funeral directors. So please stay tuned for that, but please know that we are working on that. It's a constant question that we're asking of the CDC to include funeral directors as among the groups who have priority for getting PPE and those other necessary supplies to keep you and your coworkers safe.
There are some questions there about that again, we just simply don't have the answers to. I see a question there about how long the virus is active in a dead human body and how long it's on viable on hard surfaces. Those are questions, I think, going back to what Wally said earlier, that we just simply don't have the answers to yet. This is, relatively new virus as it's appearing, and they're doing research now to get us those answers. And as soon as we have those answers, we will. But going back to some of Wally's practical advice earlier, on embalming these cases, still allow these families an opportunity to say their goodbyes, I think makes good sense, and I think we can do it. And maintain a safe environment, not only for our employees, but also for those who would be in attendance.
I have a question from Gary again, and he says, we have no problem with the embalming and preparation. Our concern is about the public. And Gary, I think as we talked initially, that if we do a thorough disinfection of the body with a disc spray, use antiseptic soap, and then do another application of the disinfecting spray, dress the bodies and place them in the casket. I don't see that there is, me personally, and based on what I've read from the CDC, and this is not coming from NFDA, but this is based on the information that I've got through the CDC, there is no harm expected to the general public by attending an open casket visitation. I would probably instruct or ask that the families not handle their loved one. A lot of them want to come in and kiss them and touch them, and I may suggest that they not do that at this time. And I think,
yeah, and Wally, that's actually a recommendation of the CDC. They recommend that you suggest to families that they not touch, kiss the body of their loved one. So that's something the CDC is actually directly recommending. And I think, letting family knows that is advice coming from those who know and who have the information, that they're making this recommendation. So, that's certainly something that's coming right from the experts.
I've been asked, should we worry about cross-contaminants on equipment? Is there any recommendations on how to keep them sterile if an autoclave isn't available? Yes, you should. You should always thoroughly clean your instruments, especially your trocar and all the instruments you use during an embalming, even if it's an autopsy case, all those extra instruments. But you should, all the chemical companies, and you should, if you didn't already have them, you should have those on hand, and they will sterilize those instruments. And you don't need an
and if you visit NFDA's COVID-19 information page, you should see the link right there at the very top, on the very top of that list of links. The CDC has recommended, specific antiviral chemicals. There's a whole list of them. We have a link to that on our page, so look at that. And in terms of, we're getting a lot of questions about, just general public and traffic in the funeral home, how to handle that. We certainly have some recommendations, again, on our COVID-19 information page about how you can clean your funeral home after a service or after you have someone in an arrangement conference room. We have recommendations there. And remind families and the public of the things that they need to be doing to protect themselves, things like hand washing, social distancing as possible. I know that's really difficult during a funeral. If someone's crying, your instinct is to give them a hug, pat them on the arm, but just remind them of those things that they can do to stay safe. On our COVID-19 page, we have links to flyers and posters that the CDC has developed that you can post in your funeral home to remind folks of those things. And certainly as you're in that arrangement conference with the family, you can discuss those kinds of things, and they can, figure out for themselves what they're comfortable with. Ultimately, you can make the recommendation, but it's up to them to, it's their personal responsibility to follow through and actually do that and take those steps.
We have another great question from Jordan. Jordan Deals. Do we need to worry about returning items to family after the deceased was wearing or holding in the casket? What I would suggest, after you remove those, take them to your prep room, lay them on paper toweling, and spray them with disinfecting spray. That's what I would do.
And then we've got a question there about the arrangement conference where the participants have been in contact with a deceased who was diagnosed with COVID-19. Those are probably going to be some things we get answers from the CDC, but it may be a situation that Jessica alluded to earlier where the family may elect to postpone the memorial for some reason, because again, we've got an incubation period that, they may want to, for their benefit as well as their friends and extended family. So that's something we're going to have to play by ear and get more answers to, but it may be where we have extended time between death and memorialization.
Yeah, and another alternative, if the family doesn't want to wait or wants to at least have some initial conversations, maybe it's using tools like Skype or FaceTime so that, they're maintaining their distance and whatever self-quarantine they may be under. And, you're also keeping yourself and your staff safe. But so those kinds of tools are available. So, now is certainly the time to become familiar with those.
Absolutely.
I have so many questions here. I'm trying to get through them and see what we may not have answered yet, but I'm sorry we can't get to all your questions, unfortunately.
And we're certainly on our end, we have all of these questions, and we're going to take a look at them and perhaps do some sort of follow-up FAQ document where we provide responses to some of these questions that we're getting, and where we have information and answers that we can provide to you.
I would like to respond to a student in Arkansas, if I could. Elizabeth, you indicated that you were told to soak cotton in cavity fluid and place in the nose and throat, and then aspirate and cavity embalm in a normal case. If you're talking about a coronavirus case, I don't know that cavity fluid is pretty strong. I would stick to the disc spray. I think that would take care of it and alleviate the problem.
And a lot of the answers to, Jessica, and I know you alluded to earlier, are on our COVID page at NFDA. So I encourage everybody to go there and take a look at that. And as we have more information, as it becomes available, we'll push it out there. So continue to visit that page on a regular basis for, information that becomes available.
Yep. And don't forget about some of those other resources. You can see up on the screen, we have a link to OSHA, and I apologize, that's probably my fault, but OSHA should be osha.gov. Certainly things like bloodborne pathogen standards, there are other standards that you need to adhere to. So there's guidance on the OSHA page. In terms of those of you who are owners and managers of funeral homes, check out the Department of Labor page. And we also, on our COVID-19, have a link to CESCO Management Consultants, which is NFDA's endorsed provider of human resources services and information. When you're dealing with things like staff who perhaps have to self-quarantine or who may be ill and need to be out on sick leave, there's some guidance from the Department of Labor and from CESCO that might help you figure out how to handle and navigate those situations. Obviously this is a fluid situation and an unprecedented situation in this country. And so I think, folks like the Department of Labor are working to get up to speed and figure out how to help employers navigate those questions as well. So please check out those resources as well.
We have a couple more questions I'd like to respond to, if it's okay.
Yep, absolutely, Wally.
Where did they go? It jumped on me. Scott Berna asked, should we still do ID viewings without embalming for cremation families? And I say, me personally, this is not NFDA, me personally, if you thoroughly disinfect the body, you wash the body, and then you disinfect, if you thoroughly clean the nostrils and the oral cavity, and I would go so far as to aspirate. I know you say they didn't authorize that. If we're going to be bringing bodies into our chapel for families to ID view or to say goodbye to prior to cremation, we're going to have to take some steps to make sure everybody involved is safe. And that may include an aspiration, introduce cavity fluid, and then set the features and just disinfect those orifices so that you're not having pressure in the abdominal area pushing that particulate out that would contaminate those families. And that would be up to you and the families to discuss that. I wouldn't do it without their permission. But what I've learned about funeral directors is they're very cautious about bringing difficult questions to the forefront with families because they think the families can't take it. What I have found is if you ask the family the right question for the right reason, they're going to accept it and they're going to give you the answer you're looking for. So don't be afraid to ask questions of those families so that you don't find yourself in hot water sometime. I hope that answers.
Absolutely. And I think most of these families would be very understanding of additional disinfection in order to give them a chance for an ID viewing in case of cremation. Wally, I think you're exactly right.
And there was a question about having large crowds in your funeral home during visitations. And again, I think we addressed that that's more, and the question was, is there a legal responsibility? I think people are still going to grocery stores. They're still going to movies. They're still going out in public. If we choose to have visitations, I think families are learning the proper way to cough, maybe to stay in if they're not feeling well. So at least out here where I'm at, we're still business as usual and just trying to help people by having hand sanitizers, plenty of soap in the restrooms, and making sure that they understand that give families some space.
We've spent a lot of time talking about protecting the public and protecting our neighbors. We need to remember, as Wally said, to protect ourselves, and part of that's our whole mental health in dealing with situations like COVID-19. So I would encourage everybody to remember NFDA's EAP program. If you need someone to talk to, you need some additional resources for you or your employees, remember that NFDA's EAP program is there for you. Continue to use them as a resource. Rely on NFDA to get you the information as it becomes available, and hopefully everybody will stay safe.
Okay.
You know, about the
There's a
last
question there. There's a
Go ahead.
question there, Wally, about the risk for exposure and whether they should use barrier garments in an ID viewing. You know, going back to your disinfection recommendation, and I think it makes a lot of sense. But I think, again, going back to the CDC's recommendation is we would recommend that those people not come in contact with the body during that ID viewing, create that barrier of space, if you will, I think would be prudent and in conforming with what the CDC is recommending.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And I just again want to reemphasize that how important I think it is that we as funeral service practitioners be that calm, reassuring voice. Let them know, let your public know. Don't be on social media telling them how bad this is, what a terrible thing this is. We all know that. The news is telling us this 24 nonstop hours a day. So I think our communities need to hear from us. We're here, we know what to do. We're here to care for your loved one and you as a family. And just, I can't stress that enough. Don't let them see you sweat. Take the high road and do what we're trained to do. That's what I suggest, my friends. But be safe and take care of yourselves, take care of the dead, and take care of the families. Simple as that.
And we've gotten a couple of questions about people, you know, just wondering if they should communicate proactively with their community to let them know that it's okay to have funerals, that families still have the choice of burial or cremation. Yeah. And yes, I think, you know, that's a great idea. You know, I know I've already seen some funeral homes posting things on Facebook. Here at NFDA, we're developing just a news release template, the language of which you can send out either as a news release or post to your funeral home's website or social media sites. So we'll have that up on our COVID-19 information page a little bit later today. So please be on the lookout for that. And yeah, absolutely, please reassure families of the things that you're doing to keep them safe and to enable them to come together to gather and honor their loved ones.
Can I answer a question, Joseph?
Yep, absolutely.
Joseph asked, what's your opinion on making arrangements with family members who may be contagious, you know, that may have been in close proximity to someone who died with the coronavirus? Should we all gown up for the arrangement conference? And again, me personally, I wouldn't do that. I think keep your distance. I wouldn't sit right next to them. Just have the conversation before they come in. Let's wash hands. Let's disinfect our hands. Be careful of the writing instruments that we use. Clean the tables. If you share coffee or bottled water, make sure everything is clean. And if someone has a cough, then I would really keep my distance. Well, if someone's coughing, I wouldn't want to meet with them.
Going back to your comment earlier, Jessica, in those instances, you may want to Skype the arrangement conference. You may want to do it over your telephone and FaceTime. There may be a necessity, again, to wait a period of time for those individuals. So you're going to have to use your best judgment in some of those cases, continue to follow the CDC guidelines, but you know, there's a way to certainly handle that and remain safe. And as Wally said, that's the important thing, is to keep yourself safe and to protect the community.
Yeah, and I think the public knows that we're in an unprecedented time, and so they're I would imagine that they're going to be a little bit flexible and willing to do things in a way that may be a little bit different than how they would normally be done. So I think everyone's sort of a little bit more understanding that it's not necessarily business as usual.
We had another question from Jennifer. At this point, should we treat all cases the same, even if not a confirmed COVID case? And to that, my answer is universal precautions.
We've got another question here from Patrick, and I think we addressed it earlier. The question is how long the virus is active in a dead human body, or how long it will live on a hard surface. That's a question we simply don't have the answer to. There's research going on right now, as I understand it, to get us those kinds of answers, but CDC or Health and Human Services, to my knowledge, has not been able to give us a definitive answer on that. So we just do not know it.
Yeah, I think there's been some information out there about hard surfaces, but they have not, that we've seen, shared information about how long the virus remains active in the body. So we can share some of that information about how long it lasts on hard surfaces, but just know that we're asking those questions about how long it survives in the body. Okay, let's see. We are just about at our time here. Maybe we can take one more question. Let's see here. Does a funeral home need to post any signage to caution the public that they are viewing a COVID-19 person?
I think in today's world, with social media being what it is, I would be surprised if most people in attendance didn't realize that before they got to the funeral home. And that's a legal question that would need to be answered as far as liability is concerned, and I don't know the answer to that, but I would suspect that most people will know that before they get to the funeral home. At least in a small town like ours, you'd know.
Yeah, that almost borders on a HIPAA issue that maybe Scott Gilligan could address at some point.
Yep.
That's a great question.
Yep, we will work on getting those kinds of legal questions to Scott. And I think, as I mentioned earlier, some of these legal issues, you know, there aren't necessarily any existing laws out there. So it's, you know, trying to take what's out there and interpret and apply it to these kinds of situations. So yeah, we'll work on gathering some information from Scott Gilligan. And again, as we have new information, we'll post it on our COVID-19 information page.
We have a question from Washington that they've received guidelines from Washington State that have handled COVID cases, and they highly advised us not to do open casket services or ID viewings. Could this be up to the funeral home's discretion if we do have these services? I don't know what your state has done. If it's a hard and fast rule, probably didn't come through the legislature. So I would suspect that a funeral home could probably still do what they want to do. I don't know. That's
yeah, you know, I mean, we've seen state and local departments of public health issuing guidance that is more stringent than what the CDC has offered. So certainly, if your state has stricter guidelines, follow those. The CDC says open casket funerals are fine, but you know, if your state or local health department is telling you otherwise, defer to their guidance and wisdom.
John Martin asked if I can answer one more question. Is a bleach solution good to use to also help disinfect surfaces and embalming tools? I would be careful with that. You know, they don't recommend using bleach in an embalming room because bleach and formaldehyde is a no-no. I do know that if your bleach solution is too strong, it will hit and cause problems with your stainless steel instruments. So I think there's enough good products out there from the suppliers to use that unless you just run out, I would use bleach if it was the last thing that you had to use, but be careful with it. Be very careful with it.
Great. Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. We're right about at our time, and I want to certainly be respectful of funeral directors who have to get on with their busy days serving families. So thank you very much, Wally and Bryant, for your time today, for sharing your thoughts and knowledge with us. If you gentlemen just want to have any last parting words, we will finish with those final comments and then end our webinar.
Go ahead, Wally.
Again, I think I've said it a couple of times that families deserve the opportunity to say goodbye. And we need to be the ones to make sure that that can happen. So be that helpful face you've always been, be the rock star in your communities and do what other people can't do. And that's to give the dead back to their families to say a proper goodbye. And you all can do it. Be safe out there, folks. Just be safe, be mindful what's around you, and care for the dead and their families, and you'll be rewarded. Have a great day. Thank you.
I would echo Wally's comments. We take care of the dead and their families. And as Wally said, we return the dead to their families. And I think we as professionals can continue to do that. I, like Wally, remember when AIDS was first on our radar screen and how some of us were so apprehensive about that. We came through that and were able to allow families the opportunity to say goodbye at that point in time. We faced other communicable disease situations, and I think we can navigate this one just as well. But please protect yourselves and protect the public. We sometimes need reminders about universal precautions. Sometimes we get a little lax, but please don't take anything for granted. Continue to use universal precautions. Treat everybody as though it could be contagious, because we never know. The incubation rate, what it is, some people are going to show different levels of symptoms. Just remain safe.
Great. Thank you again to NFDA President Brian Hightower and Funeral Director and Embalming Expert Wally Hooker for joining us today.
Not expert.
You're an expert to us, Wally.
I already had a friend in Ohio tell me to quit touching my face, so don't.
It's so hard. It's so hard. And thank you to everyone who joined us via Zoom and via our Facebook live broadcast. Again, please stay tuned to our NFDA COVID information page. We're going to be posting the latest information there, and we will be communicating with you as often as we can as we get new information to help keep you, your coworkers, and the families that you serve safe. Thank you, and have a great day.
Thank you.